Ladies and gentlemen, it was a great pleasure. I give you Mr. Erik Vermeulen. Thank you.
I've got no idea how you follow that, but so that was the comedy, and there'll be a bit more later on. Anyway, so what do I do? Basically, I'm a behavioural strategist, not so much on the economic side, because every time I tell people I do that, they say to me, well, could you look at this balance sheet? If I could do that, I'd be an accountant. But what I do is I have a look at the effect of behaviour on the bottom line. I have a look at how behaviour influences corporate culture and how behaviour influences, what people buy, how they buy it, how they think about what they do. And alongside that, I also climb a couple of mountains, lead people on adventures and expeditions, and that kind of puts me in a fairly unique position to combine these behavioural insights of what we do in the corporate world and what we do on mountains and life-threatening situations, and find out how the two kind of speak to each other. Are people the same drawing money from an ATM than they are, can I say it, cucking off at 7,000 meters in a blizzard when it's minus 20 and they haven't eaten for 30 hours? Do they react the same to your card not coming back out the machine? And it's those kind of insights that are used to then look at companies in terms of saying, how does what we do influence what people think about us? The easiest way to explain behavioural strategy is to say to you, if you think of the bank that puts on a billboard and says, how can we help you? It looks brilliant on a billboard. Am I right? It kind of falls right on its arse when you walk into the branch and you ask them to change your banking, to change your address, or heaven forbid you want to take out a home loan. It also kind of tells us why banks that tell us they're moving forward use the image of the space shuttle on the same billboard. I mean, how? Right? 50-year-old technology, but this is what takes us moving forwards. So in the next 20 minutes, which is what I've got. No, I've got how long do I have? 10 minutes. I'm going to take some excerpts from two of my presentations. One is called Finding Your Five. It's called Business Lessons from Kids. And the other one is from a talk called Cordialism, How the Best Companies Lose Their Flavor. And then we were asked to think of responses to some fairly tough questions right at the end. So I'll get to that at the end. So from Find Your Five, which is a talk that came about when I was foster parent to 3 kids. My domestic worker phoned us one day when she went home to the Free State. She said, listen, she called me Dad. She said, look, I don't know what to do with my kids. They're staying with my mom, who is a raging alcoholic. It's not good for them. I said, listen, just get them in the taxi with you, bring them up. And all of us lived in a little house in Parkhurst. So kind of got thrown in the deep end of now raising kids, ranging from Andres, the little one Nita, who was 18 months old, to Andres and Mina, who were both about 5, and a teenager, believe it or not. That's probably the toughest. So dealing with these kids coming from really impoverished communities and watching them integrate into the parks of Joburg was fairly interesting. And it got me thinking around all that stuff we read in success manuals, those big bookshelves we have full of how to be better at this and how to close the deal and how to make $1 million by 25 and what are some other ones? Unleash the Giant. You all have those, right? And the interesting thing is, I think a lot of that stuff we have at the age of 5. And then we go to school at the age of 7, and for the next 12 years, all that stuff gets beaten out of us progressively until there's very little left, and we kind of now have to rush out and buy the books. And besides, if the guys who wrote those books are that successful, why do they have to write the book? Just a thought. But the first thing that I realized about 5-year-olds and the way they approach life is they've got this amazing ability and appetite for risk and adventure. Not the kind of risk that says you step in front of a moving bus, but the kind of risk that says we're always pushing our boundaries. We're always trying to see what it is that we're capable of. And I remember walking outside one afternoon, and Andres, who was about 5 at the time, was on the garden wall, which in Parkhurst is about 6 foot high. There's an electric fence. The neighbour's pit bull terrier is going crazy. And Andres is walking on the wall, and he gets to the other side, and he kind of jumps around, and he keeps going. And all the while he's doing that, he's saying to himself, look, I'm walking on the wall. Check, I'm walking on the wall. And I stood there for about 10 minutes, and he was walking on the wall. My wife then goes outside and sees him walking on the wall. What's her response? Like, get off there before you fall off. And within 2 minutes, Andries is now saying to himself, don't fall off the wall, don't fall off the wall, and he falls off the wall. Hurts himself, and she says, see, I told you so. So the thing is, we all have this craving for taking risks. We all have this craving for pushing boundaries, for taking an adventure, for looking to see, what we're really capable of. And in the early 90s, when we were doing research around this whole concept of adventure-based experiential learning, who's been on those team building things, where you kind of go to the bush and you've got to fill drums with water, but the drums are full of holes, or, move the tire from, we all remember. You can blame me. So we were instrumental in bringing that stuff into South Africa in the early 1990s. But it wasn't just a case of saying, we saw this in a Camel Trophy video, so let's just get business people to do that. My colleague at the time got a doctorate for his efforts, but we did extensive research on this whole concept of adventure and how we can use that to elicit behavior and to build teams. But part of that whole concept was about understanding what is adventure. So we were both lecturing at university at the time, which is a great petri dish for getting students to do all sorts of weird stuff and seeing how they respond. So we took students on adventure camps. We had them abseiling off mountains and flying down zip lines and asked them about their responses, before it, during that, and after it. And strange enough, one of the things we found in that is that behavior equals adventure equals uncertainty. If the minute the outcome of something is uncertain, we find that people then experience this psychological sense of adventure. It's kind of, if you're in sales, you experience it every day. Because who knows what the guy on the other side of the desk is going to say. What we also found is that the more control somebody has over that outcome, no matter how uncertain it is, the more intensely they experience that. So that then led us to developing these kind of team building environments. But the same also then holds true for how we approach people within business. And the next thing that I saw in 5-year-olds was how Andries and Mina kind of then had to live in this, city life, not only that, but in an environment where there was this abundance of money. You say to your 5-year-old, he comes to you and says, Mark, could I have a new car? And your response is, no, I don't have the money now. And you'll say, but just go to the ATM and draw some. Well, no, it's not quite that simple. I don't have the money. Yeah, but just go to the ATM. So one of the things that happened fairly early on is, the kids came up around June, July. And as the end of the year was approaching, all of a sudden it was like they wanted to know what they're getting for Christmas. So not knowing how to deal with this at the time, I said to them, well, what would you like to get for Christmas? You wouldn't believe what Andries and Mina came up with, right? I mean, it was Barbie dolls and this thing, and Andries said, well, he wants a PlayStation. I'm like, sorry? I said to him, and what if we can't get a PlayStation? He said, well, then maybe an Xbox. I said, well, do you know what this stuff costs? He says, what? Hold on, he said. And he came back with the newspaper cutout, from Incredible Ripoff. And Connection, and said, yeah, here, Dad, it costs $3,200. Like, that wasn't a problem for him at all. Until I kind of explained to him that, you know what, this is kind of your mom's salary. Huh? Sorry? But what was interesting was around this question then of, we keep telling the people that we manage and the people in our businesses that in order to motivate them, they've got to set goals. But do 5-year-olds set goals? I see some people shaking their heads. And I'll put it to you this way. Does Andries know what he wants for Christmas? Yeah. Right. Does he know where it's going to come from? No. Yeah, right, me. But then he does a couple of other strange things that I think as adults we forget to do. Because as adults we set goals and we kind of forget about them. And, who's written some of those things down? We've all heard that urban legend about, Harvard students who wrote down goals, achieved them. That's utter rubbish. Right? Just in case another speaker gives you that story, that never happened. It's an urban legend. But as adults, we tend, we've read or somewhere that we need to write stuff down and. Do kids write that stuff down? No, they do a couple of other things. Do they set goals? Yes. Andries knows what he wants for Christmas. Does he get it? Come on. 9 times out of 10. Am I right? What does he do to get it? He does a couple of things. Firstly, he constantly reminds you. So once he decided, Andries, that he wanted the PlayStation for Christmas, every time he saw me, he said to me, "Hey, Dad, you know that PlayStation that you're buying me for Christmas?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we'll talk about it." And 10 minutes later, "Dad, remember that PlayStation you said you're going to buy me for Christmas?" The second thing he does is he tells everybody. Right? So when Auntie Jemima comes to visit from Jakobsfontein, she sits down for tea and cake. He says to her, "Auntie Jemima, do you know that Dad's getting me a PlayStation for..." Sorry, what? And the third thing that he does is, through doing that, he creates accountability. Because the next time Auntie Jemima comes to visit, she sits me down. She says to me, "Listen, Erik, did Andries get the PlayStation for Christmas?" And if I say no, then there's trouble. So there are a couple of things that 5-year-olds do all the time that help them achieve their goals. Number one, they constantly remind us, and they also tell everybody. As adults, what do? We set a goal and we tell nobody, because heaven forbid we fail at it. Someone could laugh at us or say, "Oh, you see, I told you that was like just dreaming way too big." And it actually happened in the sort of WAC community about 2-3 months ago. I had a meeting with the team, and I said to Tafia, "So I've got this idea for a project in 2019, and I told her what it was going to be, and I could see, she was kind of humoring me, thinking, "Erik, whatever stuff you're on, drink less of it." And I gave her a quick update now. I can't yet tell you what it is, but yeah, there's a damn good chance that it will actually be happening. So tell everybody, right? And the kids create accountability. Maybe that's something we need to start doing as adults. So I hear what you say, When we're managing people in corporates today, we keep telling them, we bribe them, not just with goals, but with incentives. We know that one, right? So the top salesperson for the next quarter will win a trip not to Abuja, but to Mauritius or wherever. And what's the effect of that? The funny thing is that it's the same people that win the prizes all the time. Am I right? So one of two things happen with them. They get very motivated every time we announce the next prize. And then the converse of that is when we announce the next prize, they go, "Is that all?" Right? So the pressure comes on us to make those incentives bigger and better and more expensive every year. And we know what happens to budgets at the same time. The other side of that is that the people who never win the prizes eventually give up. So how is that motivating? We kid ourselves sometimes that by setting goals, we motivate people. So how can we do it differently? In the presentation called Cordialism, How the Best Companies Lose Their Flavor, I talk about corporate culture and how we create a culture within our business that supports our brand. And in doing that, as I said, some of those insights I draw from doing crazy stuff like that. So that kind of looks like me. I can't guarantee that it is. But I do vaguely remember taking that photograph at around 7,000 meters at minus 25 degrees Celsius on Aconcagua. In this little company we have called Explore, where we take people pretty much like yourselves on adventures all over the world. One of our golden rules is that we never sell summits. So a lot of these companies will, they'll try and sell you Kilimanjaro. So they'll say, well, for $3,500, you can go and climb Kili with us, and wouldn't it be great to stand on the summit of Kilimanjaro? And because Kili is in our backyard, and it's just over 5,800 meters, we think, and how many people go and climb Kili every year? Lots. So we think, well, what's the worst that could happen? It's Kili. Now, what happened last year? Right, Gugu Zulu. Thanks for playing. Interestingly, that little project I mentioned earlier, his widow, Letsecho Zulu, is partnering with me on that. So start getting the mind going. People die on mountains. So to sell people on a summit is creating problems, because what then happens? What is the goal? What is it that we're working towards? Right? Now, I didn't know Letsecho at the time. I'd never met Gugu. But let me speculate a little bit about why people die on mountains. Gugu goes, he's got flu when he went. We knew that. He's part of the Trek for Mandela. 48 people on this expedition, one expedition leader. A very junior doctor, who's the expedition doctor. And Gugu's not feeling that great. His wife who is a pocket rocket, says to him, "Dear, how are you feeling?" What does he tell her? Fine. Right? Through no reason other than, geez, I don't want to let her down. I don't want to let the expedition down. I'm a bit of a celebrity. And what happens? Right? The worst happens. In 2003, my phone rings and it's the coach of a high school rugby team. He says to me, "Listen, Eric, we've come across your stuff on the internet and we've lost 5 games in a row. Can you come and do us a motivational talk? Because we've got to win our next game." I said to him, "Well, Kobus, it doesn't really work that way." He says, "No, we've got to win the next game. Can you?" I said, "Well, when's your next game?" He says to me, "On Saturday." It's Wednesday. "No, but please, just come and talk to the guys." It so happened I was on my way to the Kruger Park that weekend. I said, "Look, get the guys together Friday morning. I'll pop in. I'll do an hour with them, and we'll see what happens." I'm expecting 25 first-team rugby players at Hoër Technische Skool Middelburg. I arrive there and there are 300 kids on the pavilion. Because since this is free, we better just get as much out of it as we can. My first question to them was, "Guys, why do we play rugby?" And they said, "Om te wen, oom." And I told them that's exactly why they're not winning. Huh? That one talk ended up with me consulting to them for 5 years as a sponsorship. But that first year was pretty special. Having lost 5 games in a row, they got to the Beeld Trophy quarterfinal against Affies, that little Afrikaans school next to Loftus, in Middelburg. Half-time score 27-6 to Affies. I had a chat to them at half-time. Full-time score 33-all. Quarterfinal, there has to be a winner, so they're going to extra time. Affies lose that game 38-33 in the second period of extra time. How? The captain of the Affies team that year writes in his book that came out about 4 years ago that they still do not know how they lost that game. You might have heard of him, Pierre Spies. How do you lose a game being 27-6 up at half time? Or conversely, how do you win a game being 27-6 down? One of the first things I did with the guys in that team was I took winning out of the equation of how we measure being successful. I got them to find purpose and process. We summit mountains not because we aim for the summit, but because we find purpose in process. As a result of this, on big mountains, we get more people to summits than the average, and the people who choose not to summit with us are quite happy to go home. There's no kicking and screaming, and then they sign up for the next trip on another mountain where they summit. But when we find purpose and process, we not only give people control over an outcome, but we also take the pressure off them, right? Because if your process is right, you'll achieve the goal that you're wanting. If your target is X number of revenue in terms of sales, if your process is right, you'll achieve that. But you won't achieve it if you keep focusing on the number. The second thing we focus on mountains is we get people to understand challenge. Remember how I said earlier, when we challenge people with a certain goal or a certain number or a certain incentive, it works for that A-type personalities, the small minority of people. But what about the rest? What we find is that we've got to so carefully pitch challenge based on people's level of skill that we create a sense of adventure, that we create a sense of, if I stretch myself just a little bit, I can do this. But the minute we set a goal that appears to be unattainable, they become disengaged. They experience what we call misadventure, right? They hate the trip, they hate their job, right? And, well, for want of a better word, they become a bit delinquent within your business. These are the guys at the water cooler that, spread the rumors and did you hear this and did you see that? So the secret in engaging employees in everything that we do is to find that sweet spot where they're not bored with the challenges we set them, but that the challenges we set them aren't beyond what they could reasonably achieve. And we find that doing this on mountains, and so we've got an Everest expedition planned for 2019. We believe that we will then have enough people in our client base who are skilled enough and ready, and who have done enough trips with us in order for us to take them to a mountain like Everest. Because Everest tends to kill people, as do most mountains, but Everest more so than others. By the way, I made a mistake. It's not mountains that kill you. It's the decisions you make on the mountain that kills you. And as someone in my friendship circle often points out to me, she says, yes, Erik, the decision that kills you is the one to go in the first place. But we can narrow it down to 4 things within a simple corporate environment that we need to engage employees. And the first one is people need perceived control. As I said, on the mountains, in the soccer, in the rugby team, the minute people lose that perception of control over their goals, over their career, over their progression, right, they become disengaged. This stuff comes from a company called Zappos.com. Online shoe sales. Really? Who would buy shoes online? Well, not too many people I know, because you never know how it's going to fit. You know, a size 4 Jimmy Choo fits differently to a size 4 Pep Stores special. I would imagine, because I've never bought Pep Store specials. I'm just kidding, right? The second thing that people need is perceived progress. Working with the claims department at an insurance company, who the HR folks told me were demotivated and needed to be motivated. We figured out that it's not that they were demotivated. What wasn't sitting well with them is the fact that there was 0 perceived progress. So for every claim they finish, 2 more got dumped on the top of the pile. So no matter how hard I work, the pile kind of never changes height. Right? That's the closest you ever get to hamsters on a wheel. The third thing that people need is connectedness. Interesting, on each of the mountain trips that we do, we create this little WhatsApp group where we do, sort of pre-trip training, group training sessions. And some of those groups are still active 2 years after the fact, because guys create such a connectedness through that we keep chatting. And of course, everyone, some of the guys do a trip a year with us. So connectedness gets people moving beyond what they believe they're capable of. And then finally, vision and meaning. Believe it or not, people do things within your organization, not for your reasons, right, but for their own. So you might dangle the incentive trip, but quite honestly, right, Maggie in customer service really wants to meet her targets to get her Christmas little bonus to take the family to the usual holiday spot in Margate. Right? It's not about the trip that she can take with the company to Mauritius, because that's not important to her as a mom of 2 or whatever. Right? What's important to her is what she can do back for the family. So how do we tap into people's own vision and meaning for their own life in order to get them engaged within our business?